Tomorrow, folks. My name is Joel. I am the programmer, and this is a breakdown of Marvel's Eternals. There's a bunch of Easter eggs flying everywhere, so sit back, relax. I did the hard job for you, so you don't have to. So check these out. The Eternals movie gained a lot of flack for its plot and somewhat agenda-pushing rhetoric. Despite all of that, I enjoyed the movie as a Marvel fan. It answered some questions that I had, brought some others to light, and gave me the action that I was looking for or hoping for in the end. As everyone does with this franchise, my eyes were peeled looking for all the Easter eggs that I could find, so here's what I saw. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Just gotta get this out of the way. There's a lot of stuff that I'm about to uncover in this walkthrough of this movie. So if you haven't seen that yet, do that now before we move on. I'll be here when you come back. The opening scene starts with a nod to the Bible with "in the beginning" in a Star Wars-ish type crawl to start everything off. Basically cementing to the audience that the Eternals come from a faraway place called Olympia. More on that later. Then this also plays into the Celestials being gods, and while we have character names like Icarus, Athena, Gilgamesh. Yeah, you get the point. Okay, in this movie, Ajak is depicted as the leader of the Eternals, and in the film is embodied by Selma Hayek, which is a slight deviation from the comics. So next, the Eternals arrive on Earth seemingly for the first time, more on that later, and deal with deviants in Mesopotamia, which to me feels like a slight nod to the Bible, as a large portion of biblical events happen in that geographical area. Not a historian, don't shoot the messenger. This is where we see each Eternal's power and the early foreshadowing of Eternals being synthetic beings. We also get a bit of a look into how the MCU establishes the giving of technology to humans. Something else to note is the Eternal ship, the Domo, or the name of the ship is the Domo. Shows the type of power or form of power that the Eternals wield in the design of the ship. It's very symmetrical in nature, stacked on top of each other. The name Domo Domo specifically, is a nod to the character in the comics. In these opening scenes, we can see different kinds of technology being used as weapons here, which lends itself to further establishing the future of humans as seen through the eyes of the Eternals. Okay, so we pick up with Icarus using his powers to fight off a deviant, which is taken directly from this comic. Here, I want to pause though, because I feel like a lot of people, possibly everyone, is sweeping his power under the rug. So, could it be that Icarus is actually a first sighting of a different type of Marvel character? One that we've never seen in the MCU specifically. We've seen him other places, but we haven't seen this person in the MCU. Who do you think that might be? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Okay, back to the Easter eggs. We see the ending of this fight with a little boy getting or receiving a dagger. I believe that's from Cersei, which is actually a real artifact. Flash the Marvel marquee and Shang-Chi. Okay, so we pick up with Cersei appearing on screen seemingly for the very first time in London solo, where she's late for a presentation, rushing to a museum that actually has the same dagger from before. As she runs to her class, she acknowledges a figure of James Darwin, the guy that's always talking about evolution and stuff. Her talk describes apex predators, which is a foreshadowing of how the Celestials are supreme beings and deviants are the prey to be eliminated, which becomes ironic as deviants begin to gain power from some Eternals and they become more intelligent creatures. We also meet Dane Whitman for the very first time, and as we see in the end credits, this is actually Black Knight, who is a parallel to Thor, since his sword can only be wielded by someone with a dark heart. He quotes poet Walt Whitman's poem, which seems to kind of be a call back to the blip, since the current scene that we're looking at happens to be after is happening after Endgame. At his party, Cersei gives him a ring that has his family crest on it, which is a raven, which is a call to the comics character's design, which also has a raven on it. And we see later that he says, my family's history is kind of weird. He also asks Cersei, are you a wizard like Doctor Strange, bringing us to a point that makes me wonder if the Sorcerer Supreme's power and all the folks that follow after that come from an origin of the Celestials? Fast forward and we get a sighting of Icarus. Okay, listen. Throughout this movie, his character is a very large pull from Superman. Everything down to the way that he glides through the air to the rays coming out of his eyes. It's Superman-like, to the point where Phastos' son mistakes him for the Man of Steel. But they piece up homeboy Deviant, and Cersei gives Dane Whitman an insight on why they did nothing about Thanos, which I theorized about in this video. But she tells him,
didn't you guys help fight Thanos, or any war, all the other terrible things throughout history?
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
We pick up, or should I say flashback, into Babylon in a very intense fight scene where the Ishtar Gate was reconstructed for the film and is currently on display at the Gargamon Museum. Ajax is then summoned by Erishim for the very first time, but we only see some of his face, and he is personified specifically by his voice, basically signifying to the audience, to us, that these guys are huge. Flashback to present day, and Cersei, Sprite, and Icarus head to Ajax's house or ranch where they find her dead. However, Icarus is pulling up the rear almost like he knows what's already about to happen. And we find out later that he really is a snake in the grass. Another flashback to Tenochtitlan, spell check or price check on that one. The Eternals see humans tearing each other apart with firearms, which brings a debate between the Eternals on whether or not humans are even worth protecting at all, which makes Thena crack up. And in the film, they call it suffering from mad weary, but what it is remembering what happened on multiple different planets for millions of years. This is a foreshadowing of something that is to come later. The scene paints Thena as a villainous character, which we find out later is not the case. This then splits the Eternals, with Druig explaining how humanity left on its own devices or something to that effect is destructive. He then pulls out the mind control card, makes the Spanish and the Aztecs drop the blickies and follow him into the jungle. Gilgamesh takes on the task of watching over Thena and is the only one to have the ability to calm her down when she's fired up. This seems like a callback to the relationship that Black Widow and Hulk had, even in the exchange of handholds and special sayings, remember who you are. And come to think of it, at least for me, this brings back two callbacks, one for Mufasa telling Simba, remember, and the Black Widow Hulk lullaby, the sun's getting real low. Gilgamesh even dies trying to save her. And although Widow doesn't die in an effect directly to save Hulk, she does die for the betterment of him and the Avengers. Might be a reach, but I feel like there's a connection. They track down Kingo, and on the set of his Bollywood movie, with the very first sighting of the movie's comedic relief, Karun, we hear a reference to vampires in the MCU. Because at the end, in the end credits, we hear the voice of Mahershala Ali, who is slated to play Blade in the Phase 4 release of Blade. I'm going to go into more of that in a later video, so stay tuned for that. On Kingo's plane, we see how much of a Captain America fan he really is, because we see not only in the background of the Bollywood film or the movie shoot, we also see it in the background of his plane in an earlier form, however. In Australia, we see another sighting of a deviant, but this time a very dead one, which was the work of Gilgamesh. And when we see Gilgamesh, he refers to Karun as Alfred from Batman, which is another reference to the DC universe or DC characters in the MCU, which I find kind of cool because a few people from Marvel actually worked at DC, which includes the creator of the Eternals, Jack Kirby. Fun fact here, what major villain in the DC world do you think Jack Kirby created during his time at DC? Put that in the comments below. I'll be sure to read them all and let you know if your guess is correct. Pushing forward to Dinner with the Eternals, we hear a conversation between them that we saw in the trailer, which makes a little bit more sense now. Sprite asks,
Thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome.
So now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are both gone, who do you think's gonna lead the Avengers?
I could lead them.
Ajax didn't even choose him as the leader of the Eternals, and specifically because he pushed her off of a cliff to thought out deviants. Nobody's choosing you, bro. Cersei is the actual leader and finds out how to interact with Arishem, who then tells her that the time is almost up, which pretty much flies in the face of everything Cersei thought that they were on the earth to do. Arishem explains that the entire plan, the old time, was to grow the population of Earth so that a new celestial could be born, further shaping other galaxies, and that's a problem, big fella. She also then learns that the Eternals are nothing more than synthetic beings not from Olympia, which is what we previously thought, programmed to do the bidding of Arishem, specifically in the film, and that they have their minds wiped each and every time they complete a mission, which in this case, or in this situation, the sleeping baby celestial is actually Tiamat, which is taken from the comics, but not the location, because this guy actually comes from a volcano near the Indian Ocean, possibly Fiji, but in the comics, it's from San Francisco, I think so. Here's a little backstory just for some context. Strap your hats on, put your seatbelts on, because might get a little bit bumpy. But here we go. A celestial seed was sent to Earth, and for that matter, multiple planets over millennia, along with Eternals, as stated before, to protect the life form of that planet from deviants, who were also created by Celestials, until enough intelligent life energy was consumed for an emergence. See, in the comics, Celestials created three types of beings: deviants, Eternals, and humans with dormant genes, which is where we possibly could get mutants from in the MCU, which I actually hope happens, but we'll see. We can also look towards that fact for the reasoning behind Bruce Banner and with gamma rays, Steve Rogers with the serum, and others. So, deviants were sent to Earth to initially wipe out apex predators to help sustain life. Again, back to what Cersei was talking about in the museum. But Arishem lost control of them, and they went buck wild, eating everything in sight. And here is where I want to pause for a Thanos commercial fan theory break. Okay, y'all still with me? Cool. So, Thanos was born with the deviant gene, as we know from the comics. And as he went from planet to planet, G-snatching life like gangbusters in the pursuit of the Infinity Stones, which is, by the way, there are 6 of them, and Arishem has 6 eyes, so maybe there might be a connection here, I don't know. But Ajax is met by Icarus on her ranch to discuss this situation regarding the blip, which leads me to believe that if the Avengers hadn't stepped in to fight Thanos, the Eternals would have. It's literally in their job description to fight deviants. And I just said that Thanos has the deviant gene. However, since the Avengers did step in and reverse the snap, shout out to Bruce Banner for that one, that they didn't have to interfere, and thus keeping on pace with their mission. You know, the whole Watcher thing, I cannot interfere. They can only interfere if a deviant is involved with nothing standing in the way, which is why Icarus kills her. When she starts to believe that the people of Earth are worth saving, it goes against the mission. That then makes her a deviant in his eyes. Again, shameless plug here, but if you want to check out what I previously thought about this whole Thanos theory, check this video out. All right, back to it. And all right, We're almost done, but here, folks, is where we get the meat and potatoes of this film. And I, for one, loved every minute of it. Every bit of CGI spectacle made me so happy to be a Marvel fan. See, yes, the movie was a very different type of Marvel film than other Marvel movies, but I think this is actually a raised intellectual bar for the MCU. Similar to what happened when we first got the appearance of Vision, we get more empathy introduced. We now have even more, and makes me care about these characters in a different way, a way that's not tied directly to fight scenes and space jumping, although I love that too. Cersei tells Dan, "Get your affairs in order, fam," which translated into the movie's actual lines, "Go talk to your uncle." Basically telling him that something bad may happen, so you should go patch things up with your family. This particular family member, however, in the comics is an actual evil dude called Nathan Garrett, who was previously the wielder of the Ebony Blade. And in the comics, Dane inherits a castle from his uncle, same guy, which could be where he is in the post-credit scene in the end of the movie. This conversation happens between Cersei and Dan on the island that Druig placed the Mayans and Aztecs on, and end up fighting a group of deviants, which is also where Gilgamesh ultimately dies, and Cersei realizes she can actually change higher powered beings into different objects, which is a foreshadowing for how she would defeat Tiamat later. The Alpha Deviant that absorbs Gilgamesh's power tells Thena that the Eternals aren't heroes but actually villains, which, given the original plan, kind of holds true. By the way, and it even pains me to say this because I hate clowns, the Alpha Deviant is voiced by Mr. Pennywise himself, Bill Skarsgård. Okay. Now that's over, we can move on. I hate clowns. The crew meets back on the Domo, which is in the same place they left it all those years ago, where Makari is speed reading through some old books. The emergence begins and Makari is sent out to find the origin spot. Icarus goes into heck no techno and tries to stop all the other Eternals from doing what they're trying to do and stopping the emergence. So, that's the whole plan. So that's why he's trying to stop that, to stop them from stopping that. Exactly. Where we then see an epic civil war battle between the split group of Icarus and Sprite and literally all the other Eternals. By the end, with the help of Phastos' tech, the Unimind is formed to help stop the emergence of the newly minted Celestial, which, by the way, is a nod to the comics. Cersei says to the group that Tiamat joined the Unimind, which makes me think all Celestials aren't really on board with what Arishem is actually cooking up, which maybe, possibly, we might get a civil war between them similar to the comics. And that would be an epic battle, but very hard movie to make because of all the CGI that's going to go into it. But if they do it, I'm going to be the first in line to go see it because it's going to be awesome. As the movie comes to a close, we see Icarus fly into the sun, which is a nod to his namesake from Greek mythology, who flies too close to the sun, but he actually flies into it. Sprite removes all ties from the Eternals so that she can actually have a life and grow up. A slight nod to Pinocchio and Ultron because, if you remember, he says, "I got no strings on me." The rest of the crew goes in search of other Celestials on other galaxies and planets. Cersei and Dan are catching up, and then Arishem appears, snatching Cersei, Kingo, and Phastos, telling them, "I will spare them, Earth, but I will judge your memories to find out if they are worthy or not." And specifically, which this, I believe, is where he gets his name, Arishem the Judge, another nod from the comics. So that's all the Easter eggs that I was able to find. If you found more or think I missed any, feel free to leave them down in the comments. And remember, be kind to each other when you do that. We're all fans here. Let's have fun with this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with other fans. Oh, and hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we upload other videos later in the future. It really does help the channel out, and I appreciate it. I'm the blur grammar. the blurred grammar. Thanks for watching. We're out.